The Chinese economy is facing an unprecedented economic disaster, a perfect storm that sweeps away decades of illusions about painted prosperity. The unrelenting collapse of the real estate market in recent years has transformed once vibrant cities, symbols of miraculous development, into urban wastelands filled with abandoned buildings, dusty unfinished projects, and the shattered dreams of millions. In 2025, a year when China was supposed to rise from the ashes of prolonged economic struggles, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, finds itself ensnared in a new nightmare, a sprawling debt crisis spreading like an incurable cancer. Local governments across the country are drowning in desperation, their financial resources depleted to a pitiful state, while countless civil servants endure salary cuts or indefinite delays, pushing them into a precarious existence with no certainty about tomorrow. Worse still, a brutal wave of crackdowns is sweeping through China, targeting major enterprises, once proud tech giants now suffocated by massive fines and stifling regulations from the regime. But what has truly turned China into an economic ruin? The answer lies in a terrifying reality: a tax crisis threatening to obliterate the nation's entire economic and social system. The situation has become so dire that words can hardly capture its severity. The entire government apparatus seems to teeter on the brink of complete collapse, like a rotting building awaiting a strong gust to crumble into dust. Civil servants are unpaid or underpaid, many living in destitution, struggling with daily meals and bills. With no hope for a stable future, local governments are submerged in trillions of yuan in debt, an inescapable abyss, while businesses, from small shops to massive conglomerates, are mercilessly crushed by the regime, as if Beijing is trying to squeeze the last drops of blood from an already exhausted body. To add to the tragedy, the real estate market, once the economy's cash machine, continues its relentless freefall, like a sinking ship dragging millions of citizens and businesses into the depths of despair. The question on everyone's mind is, how could a nation once held as an unstoppable economic powerhouse fall into such misery in just a few short years? In this in-depth analysis, we will dissect why China's tax system has become a deadly ticking time bomb, and how this crisis is not only destroying the country, but also spreading chaos to the rest of the world. To grasp the severity of the situation, let's start with a simple yet chilling fact. China cannot collect enough tax revenue to sustain its basic operations. Tax revenue is the lifeblood of any government, the primary resource for running essential public services like schools, hospitals, roads, high-speed rail systems, once a source of pride, and even the aggressive patrol ships defending Chinese interests in the South China Sea. When this lifeblood dries up, the entire national body weakens, rotting from within, and complete collapse becomes only a matter of time. China is now in that exact predicament: insufficient funds to keep public services running, to pay millions of civil servants, or to invest in any development projects to salvage the situation. The cracks in the financial system are growing wider, deeper, and more terrifying, with no signs of being mended anytime soon. What's astonishing and deeply alarming is that despite China's economy reporting 5.4% growth in the first quarter of 2025, government tax revenue during the same period dropped by 3.5% compared to 2024. This translates to a staggering loss of approximately 174 billion yuan, nearly $24 billion, to drown any hopes of recovery. This decline exposes a bitter paradox. While the economy appears to be advancing on paper, in reality, the government's budget is being squeezed to the point of suffocation. The Chinese regime is forced to balance maintaining the facade of growth with managing dwindling financial resources, an impossible task in the current context. Moreover, the tax crisis is not a sudden calamity. Tax revenue began plummeting as early as late 2023, despite optimistic promises from policymakers about overall economic growth. This reveals that China's economy is not just grappling with surface-level issues, but is being eroded by deep structural diseases that cannot be healed with temporary fixes. How can an economy grow while tax revenue falls? This question sends chills down the spine when one uncovers the truth behind the glossy numbers. For years, The CCP has been notoriously sensitive to anyone questioning their GDP figures. When international economists began using tax data to expose that China's GDP growth was not as robust as Beijing claimed, the regime responded by obscuring, distorting, and blurring sensitive data. This is a familiar CCP tactic: smother the truth with a massive propaganda machine costing up to $30 billion, 0 cents, annually to control the narrative for both domestic and international audiences. But, no matter how hard they try, the truth always finds a way to emerge from the ashes of lies. Take the 5.4% growth figure for Q1 2025. This is not a sign of a healthy or sustainable economy. Instead, it's the product of an artificial boom driven primarily by Chinese factories ramping up production at a frantic pace to export goods abroad. The reason for this frenzy was new U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods set to take effect in April 2025, prompting Chinese companies to rush shipments out of the country before the deadline, inflating GDP figures and creating the illusion of a reviving economy. But here's the harsh truth. This so-called growth is nothing more than a soap bubble shimmering briefly before bursting. Factories may be busy, but that doesn't mean they're earning more profits or contributing more taxes to the government. Ordinary citizens aren't spending more either, leading to a devastating drop in consumption tax revenue. As a result, despite GDP growth on paper, the actual cash flow into state coffers is drying up, leading to the 3.5% tax revenue decline, a stark warning of impending collapse. The current tax crisis is not a bolt from the blue. It is the culmination of decades of mismanagement, short-sighted decisions, and a complete lack of long-term strategic vision. To understand its origins, we must look back at how China's tax system evolved, or rather decayed over time, alongside irreconcilable conflicts between Beijing and local governments. In the 90s and 1950s, as China built its socialist economy, the tax system was so rudimentary it was almost negligible. The government owned most enterprises, and state-owned companies simply funneled profits directly to Beijing, a model that did not require complex taxation. But by the late 1970s, under Deng Xiaoping's leadership, China began opening its economy, shifting from a centrally planned system to a market-oriented one. This transition demanded a real tax system to sustain itself rather than relying solely on state enterprise profits. In the 1980s, the government introduced new taxes such as corporate and commodity taxes to meet the needs of a transforming economy. However, the early days of this new tax system were a chaotic mess. Local governments were tasked with collecting taxes but often kept the lion's share for their own needs instead of remitting the full amount to Beijing, leaving the central government in a severe budget deficit for national priorities like defense and massive infrastructure projects. By 1994, Beijing took decisive action, implementing a major tax reform to regain control. Taxes were divided into three categories: central taxes, like customs duties for Beijing; local taxes, like property taxes for provinces; and shared taxes, like value-added tax, VAT, split between the two. This reform gave Beijing about 55% of total tax revenue, while localities received the rest. At first glance, this seemed reasonable, but it exposed a fatal flaw. Local governments were responsible for 70% of public spending on schools, hospitals, roads, and more, with far fewer resources. Beijing promised to offset this with transfers, but these funds often arrived late, were insufficient, or never materialized, creating a persistent power imbalance that lingers to this day. The 1994 reform was a heavy blow to local governments. Beijing tightened control over major revenue sources like corporate taxes, leaving provinces entirely dependent on what the central government granted. This wasn't just a financial issue, but a simmering power struggle. Beijing sought a centralized system to ensure national unity, but localities felt suffocated, like laborers forced to work without adequate tools. To survive, they resorted to desperate measures. Unable to raise taxes without Beijing's approval, local governments turned to creative but risky solutions. imposing illegal fees on businesses such as licensing or permit fees, and most notably borrowing through special financial vehicles, shadow companies that allowed them to borrow money off the official books. By the 2000s, these financial vehicles became a cornerstone of local survival strategies. They borrowed billions of yuan to build gleaming new cities and modern urban centers to showcase development. Beijing didn't fully endorse this, but it turned a blind eye because these projects inflated GDP, sustaining an impressive 10% annual growth rate and reinforcing China's image as an unstoppable economic juggernaut. But as the economy slowed, these debts turned into massive, ticking debt bombs. The weak tax system, unimproved for decades, was utterly powerless to fill the growing financial gaps, pushing localities into a hopeless abyss. Another factor exacerbating the crisis was an over-reliance on land sales, a national Ponzi scheme. In the 1990s, as cities expanded, local governments discovered a financial gold mine, selling long-term land use rights to real estate developers. In China, the government owns all land, but local officials could lease it for decades, collecting massive upfront payments to fund everything from roads and bridges to schools and hospitals. By 2010, land sale revenue accounted for about 30% of local budgets, soaring to nearly 40% by 2020. Cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen rose as global icons, with skyscrapers sprouting like mushrooms, thanks to land money. But this overdependence became a deadly trap, akin to a national Ponzi scheme. Instead of building a sustainable tax system, such as property or personal income taxes, localities indulged in the addiction to one-time land sale revenue. They borrowed against ever-rising land values, believing the real estate bubble would inflate forever. But when the property market crashed in 2021, land sale revenue plummeted by 40%, leaving local governments penniless and unable to service their debts. Millions lost homes, savings evaporated, and the feeble tax system could do nothing to stem the deepening economic wound. The real estate collapse didn't just drain revenue, it triggered a horrific chain reaction. Millions became unemployed, consumer spending plummeted, and debts piled up like an insurmountable mountain. The central government tried to intervene with transfers to localities, but this was like pouring water into a sinking ship. Futile and desperate. Beijing is now experimenting with tax reforms, such as the nationwide property tax and higher personal income taxes, while attempting to restructure finances to ease the debt burden on provinces. But these measures are too late, too slow, and too weak compared to the crisis's rapid spread. Economists warn that without drastic action, at least 30% of China's provinces could face budget defaults by 2027, plunging the entire economy into an irredeemable spiral. China's tax crisis is not just a domestic issue, it's an economic nuclear bomb with global repercussions. Supply chains are disrupted, financial markets are shaken, and the risk of a global recession looms larger. Countries like Japan, Germany, and the US are scrambling to reduce dependence on China, while developing nations tremble at the prospect of drying Chinese loan funds. Can China weather this economic storm? Only time will tell. But for now, the future of the world's second-largest economy is shrouded in a dark, unrelenting gloom. In a world where cities once pulsed with the frenetic heartbeat of commerce, a cataclysmic silence now reigns. A chilling legacy of the COVID-19 pandemic that shattered economies and left scars too deep to heal. The commercial streets, once ablaze with the clamor of crowds, stand as desolate graveyards. Their storefronts bear for rent signs that flutter like tattered flags of surrender. Dust chokes the goods abandoned in shop windows, their colors bled to ghostly shades, while closure notices cling to glass doors, yellowed and curling, as if mourning the dreams they once framed. Brick-and-mortar stores, sanctuaries of human connection where families laughed, friends reunited, and memories were etched into the very walls, have been obliterated one after another in a relentless economic massacre. The streets are barren, haunted by the ghostly echoes of promotional loudspeakers, once vibrant calls reduced to a chilling wail reverberating through empty alleys. The physical retail economy lies in tatters, its lifeblood drained by the merciless rise of digital dominance. Vacancy rates have skyrocketed to apocalyptic levels, and shop owners, once proud architects of local prosperity, flee in despair, their livelihoods reduced to ashes. The vibrant fireworks of city life, the chatter of neighbors, the aroma of street food, the pulse of shared existence have been extinguished, leaving a desolate wasteland where hope itself seems to have perished. Xi'an City's transaction square, once trumpeted as the unrivaled titan of commerce in the Hunan region and a beacon of ambition meant to redefine global retail, now stands as a crumbling monument to hubris. Every shop is shuttered, floors 1 through 4 sealed like crypts, their darkened halls a testament to shattered dreams. Only a flickering cinema and a beleaguered hotel on the 5th floor cling to survival, like the last embers of a dying fire. Can anyone fathom the scale of this devastation? This was a place where oceans of people surged, where the air crackled with the energy of commerce, where vendors competed in a symphony of ambition. Now it's a necropolis, a silence that screams of defeat. The same ominous words are plastered across every urban corpse: prime shop for transfer and prime shop for rent. These signs are not confined to one location, but appear in every city, every alley, every forgotten corner of the nation. This is no local tragedy, but a nationwide calamity, an insidious blight that has left no region untouched. A walk through any urban center reveals a hierarchy of ruin, a grim ledger of industries decimated by digital onslaught. Restaurants, once the beating heart of communal life where families shared steaming bowls and laughter, have been annihilated, tables empty, ovens cold. Clothing stores, barber shops, and real estate agencies have followed suit, signs faded, doors barred with chains. Even humble vegetable and fruit markets, once alive with the daily dance of life, now stand as silent tombs, their stalls abandoned to rot. In first-tier cities, the glittering core of commercial districts, once the pride of urban economies, report vacancy rates surpassing 50%, a figure that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Over 60% of new commercial complexes launched with naive optimism collapse within months, their gleaming facades masking a hollow core. To step onto the second floor of a mall is to enter a dystopian nightmare. 95% of stores are gone, windows blacked out, interiors gutted like carcasses. The physical retail sector is not merely struggling, it is on the brink of extinction, a casualty of a world reshaped by digital predation. Consider the tragedies. A farmhouse restaurant, its owners pouring over 15 million yuan into renovations to create a haven of rustic charm, now lies in ruins. Doors sealed shut. A hot pot empire built on the finest cuts of beef and a brand polished to perfection has been reduced to a faded sign, its legacy erased. Even escape rooms crafted to spark joy in children's hearts have been wiped out, their mysteries unsolved, spaces abandoned. The first floor of one mall, once a vibrant hub of commerce, has been grotesquely repurposed into a badminton court, a surreal mockery of the chaos that has engulfed these spaces. The streets, once the lifeblood of decades of prosperity, now stand as empty battlefields. The Jiandong building, a towering symbol of economic might once sustaining thousands of families, is now a hollowed-out relic. Employees scattered, purpose lost. This is not just a crisis of commerce, but a societal collapse where ordinary people find survival itself a Herculean task. The market is a war zone, 90% of physical stores bleeding money, only a fleeting 3% clinging to profitability. The days of one job for one person are a distant memory. Workers juggle multiple roles. Waiters, chefs, managers, street vendors frying eggs in desperate bids to draw a crowd. Women are pushed to work like men, men like beasts, owners like gods, their spirits broken by unrelenting grind. Yet, despite superhuman efforts, closures march on, an unstoppable tide of despair, investing millions over a year, 365 days of grueling sacrifice, only to watch a business crumble as a soul-crushing betrayal. The dream of soaring as a dragon, a titan of industry, collapses into the reality of crawling like a worm, humbled by merciless market realities. That million was not just money. It was a brutal awakening to a new, unforgiving reality. At Wanda Plaza, once the crown jewel of retail, every storefront now screams for rent with no transfer fees. A far cry from years ago when such fees commanded fortunes. Vacancy rates on upper floors have surged past 60%. By 4 p.m., the once thriving plaza is a wasteland, its halls echoing with the ghosts of better days. Even the Central Business District, CBD, once the fiery heart of the city, is reduced to a river of cars with no pedestrians to breathe life into its streets. The most coveted locations now bear for rent signs, while lesser spots are simply forgotten, left to rot. This is no mere downturn. It is an existential crisis, a tsunami of economic ruin. Owners lie awake tormented by dread, minds racing with questions of survival. They yearn to escape but have nowhere to go. Opening a shop is no longer about ambition or hard work. The streets are so barren they seem polished by despair. The dream of building a legacy for one's children has been replaced by the primal struggle to avoid ruin. The closure rate for physical retail has skyrocketed to 70%, a figure that chills the blood. A street that once housed 100 shops now limps along with 30, and even those are on life support, owners drowning in debt. Customers visit clothing stores, try on garments, snap photos, and then flee to online platforms seduced by rock-bottom prices and free returns, a behavior cemented in the digital age. A shop owner in Hefei's Wu'er Plaza, once a proud operator of 6 stores, now clings to a single outlet, buried under loans that threaten to crush what remains of their empire. The loss of physical stores is not just a business failure, it is the death of urban vitality, the extinction of the human connections that define city life. Entire mall floors are sealed off, escalators barricaded like gates to an abandoned fortress. On the first floor, only corporate behemoths like Luckin Coffee endure, their deep pockets a shield against the storm that has obliterated smaller players. One mall, opened with grand aspirations just 2 years ago, collapsed in under 6 months. Its promise of prosperity a cruel illusion. The stakes are apocalyptic. If physical stores continue to vanish, the very foundations of society will crumble. China's 200 million small businesses, 40% of which are physical stores, sustain 800 million people, nearly every family in the nation. Their collapse would unleash a tidal wave of unemployment, plunging millions into poverty and fracturing communities. The Internet, hailed as a triumph of the digital age, is a hollow victory compared to transformative inventions like steam engines or computers, which boosted productivity. The Internet creates no true value. It lures consumers with subsidies, consolidates power into monopolistic platforms, and bleeds merchants dry with fees and price wars. Consumers revel in cheap deals. But this is a fleeting mirage as merchants' profits evaporate. Owners go bankrupt, workers face wage cuts or joblessness. Many owners, desperate to survive, borrow heavily to cover rent and payroll. But when their businesses collapse, employees are left stranded. The reality is a nightmare. Rows of shuttered stores stretching endlessly, 20 in a row, each bearing the same grim "for rent" or "for transfer" signs. A decade ago, these owners were kings, driving luxury cars. Now they have vanished into obscurity, their wealth and status obliterated. Standing on these streets for 15 minutes yields not a single customer, a chilling testament to the void left by digital dominance. Years ago, a shop transfer today would be thriving tomorrow. Now, e-commerce platforms sell in hours what physical stores earned in a year, a death knell for traditional retail. Clothing stores, skincare salons, milk tea chains like Hey Tea, all erased. Upstairs, snack bars and fast food joints replaced by hair salons and nail shops have all shuttered. Even national chains like Ajisen Ramen are up for rent, their brands powerless against the storm. Of China's 200 million small businesses, 40% are physical stores and entrepreneurs, once the lifeblood of cities. Now teeter on the edge of annihilation. Online platforms wage savage price wars, offering consumers bargains while choking merchants' margins. Skyrocketing rents, escalating labor costs, and ruthless competition create an impossible gauntlet. These shops are not just storefronts, they are the backbone of employment, sustaining millions of families and anchoring societal stability. If this chain shatters, the fallout will be catastrophic. With billions facing unemployment and communities collapsing, the loss of these stores robs cities of their soul, leaving behind empty streets where even a hot meal may soon be a luxury. Online bargains will vanish as supply chains buckle under the weight of this crisis. From the 7th floor of Wanda Cinema, the view is a descent into despair. Ajisen Ramen, Heitie, all shuttered. Signs faded. This mall in Zhongguancun's heart is a corpse by 5 p.m., its halls silent. Other malls like Bailiun Dashon share this fate. Investors face ruin with shops bought for millions now selling for pennies, if at all. Even 360, a top-tier management team, cannot halt the collapse. Coffee shops are empty shells. Entire floors are repurposed for unsustainable ventures. Shops, once safe investments, are now curses. Money once stayed local, fueling communities. Now it flows to platforms. Consumers shop online, not on streets. Many blame e-commerce, but why do outliers like flying pig egg tarts thrive? First, distrust from opaque pricing. A scar from shady merchants pushes consumers to e-commerce's transparent policies. Physical stores could rebuild trust with human warmth, but few do. Second, stores are invisible to screen-addicted consumers. A prime location once ensured success, now without an online presence, a shop is nowhere. Over 4 million restaurants closed last year, 400,000 tobacco shops in a decade. And with 106 million businesses saturating the market, margins are razor-thin. Owners unable to pivot cling to failing ventures, sinking deeper into debt. The human toll is gut-wrenching. At 6 a.m., as dawn breaks and the last customer leaves, the crushing weight of failure descends. Many dreamed of persevering, but resources are gone, hopes of better days reduced to ashes. Those who ran thriving businesses now face defeat, their pride shattered. Closures are rampant, and by summer rates could triple. Waiting for customers is a soul-crushing futility. There are none. Online stores are no salvation. Without expertise, losses mount. The market is a slaughterhouse with supply outstripping demand. Consumers browse but don't buy. One commercial street, 3 floors, 400 shops, has a rental rate below 1%. Hundreds of millions in investments have vanished. Oversupply, no management, and rent wars doom it. Big brands could have helped, but none came. With a 95% closure rate, streets are dying, human warmth gone. Restaurants face rents, 25% platform fees, and no margins. The internet's convenience has left cities lonely, their souls fading in a virtual mirage. The return of COVID-19 is a silent catastrophe engulfing China. It began without warning, like a ghost returning to haunt a house still reeling from its last encounter. A new wave of COVID-19 has swept across China, deeper, more silent, and more severe than many had feared. From the urban sprawl of Shenzhen to the high-rises of Shanghai and the labyrinthine alleys of Beijing, the virus has found fertile ground once again. But the alarm bells remain eerily silent. In Shenzhen, the outbreak has not merely persisted, it has accelerated. For 8 to 9 consecutive weeks, reported infections have surged. According to Yan Jishi, deputy director of the city's health commission, the number of cases reported in April alone exceeded 23,000, a staggering increase from just 3,500 in March. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Fever clinics are full. Funeral homes can no longer keep up with the volume. Long lines of hearses, crowded crematoriums, and whispers of pneumonia deaths circulate on social media, often before posts are censored. In Shanghai, the story is no different. Emergency rooms are packed. Fever clinics report that 80% of visitors test positive. Medical staff report administering triple tests, blood work, COVID-19, and influenza in a desperate effort to triage patients. Children as young as 15 months are testing positive. Drum teachers, factory workers, entire families are falling ill. One Shenzhen resident recounted that despite the oppressive heat, she had to sleep under 3 quilts due to chills. Her voice trembling in a social media video, she asked, "How many times do I need to get infected? Will I survive the next one?" Another netizen from Shanghai wrote that his cousin's entire family developed 40 DG fevers after returning from a short trip, yet the official response remains cold, calculated, and evasive. COVID-19 is now being recorded under different names: pneumonia, viral fever, bronchitis, anything to avoid stoking fear. State media remains largely silent, and national health authorities have not issued a comprehensive update in months. American virologist Lin Xiaoshu has publicly warned that this outbreak may involve multiple pathogens and should not be underestimated. But her warnings have received little attention within China. In Hong Kong, test positivity rates have more than doubled in 4 weeks, reaching 13.66%. Serious adult cases are surging, with dozens of deaths confirmed. In Shenzhen and Shanghai, unconfirmed reports point to rising deaths within communities. Nurses and funeral workers, off the record, admit they have never seen such a surge since the peak of 2022. The most disturbing aspect is the public's sense of resignation. "This is the new normal," one Shanghai user wrote. "We don't fight anymore, we just endure." Meanwhile, schools remain open, workplaces continue to operate, and national celebrations go on. But under the surface, a health catastrophe grows unchecked. As COVID-19 spreads quietly, confidence in the state's ability to protect its people erodes just as quietly. The fear is not just of the virus, but of the silence surrounding it. Beijing is in ruins, the shattered heart of a crumbling nation. The capital has never looked more lifeless. Once the pride of China, a global showcase of modernity and economic vigor, is now a ghost city cloaked in silence and sorrow. From the high-end shopping arcades of Sanlitun and Wangfujin to the sprawling complexes of Shimao Tianjin and Galaxy Soho, the silence is deafening. Once bursting with fashion, food, and foreigners, these places are now fading relics of a forgotten golden age. Stores stand shuttered, restaurants echo with emptiness. The Second Ring Road, once Beijing's beating heart, now feels like an open wound. Joblessness hangs in the air. Residents wander the streets in search of day labor. The low-end labor population, once fueling the city's dynamism, has been cleared out. Even Carrefour, once a foreign retail giant, has vanished. Walmart, barely surviving, is the last domino standing. Netizens mourn the disappearance of their city's soul. They write of universities now fenced off, once open landmarks now fortified. Tiananmen Square, formerly a symbol of openness, is now barricaded. Choyong's cultural industries, film, music, art, are skeletal remains. Finance has withered under regulatory burdens. Education has been decimated. Foreign investment is gone. Beijing is not merely in decline, it is in freefall. BYD implodes. Cracks in the EV empire. Amidst this national downturn, BYD, China's supposed electric miracle, finds itself at the center of a consumer revolt. 2 major dealerships have collapsed. Customers lured with promises of free lifetime service and forced bundled insurance now find themselves abandoned. Cars unpaid or undelivered while staff disappear and stores close overnight. On forums like Weibo, outrage spreads. Videos of locked doors, empty 4S stores, and frantic buyers multiply. BYD's internal structure is being exposed, a profit model that dumps pressure on dealers, inflates inventories, and collapses at the first sign of market resistance. Dealer inventories now exceed 51.8 billion yuan, receivables 79.4 billion yuan. The imbalance is deadly. In a system where car ownership depends on certificates held hostage by banks, a broken capital chain leaves buyers with no cars and no legal recourse. Angry customers demand justice, but justice is nowhere to be found. The land cracks. Drought, heat, and desperation. In Honan and Gansu, farmers stare across dead fields and cracked earth. Rain hasn't come in months. In Luoyang, a wheat farmer weeps. There is nothing to harvest. We planted life and reaped dust. Heat scorches the soil. Temperatures hit 63 degdC, 145 dgFF. Dogs burn their paws on asphalt. Sandals melt. Electric bikes sear exposed skin. Even the Yellow River, China's historic artery runs dry in places. Villagers pray for rain in makeshift altars, kneeling in sun-baked soil, begging for mercy from a heaven long ignored by party orthodoxy. But mercy does not come. Crops fail, wells run dry. In the south, in Guangxi, the drought ends not with relief but with torrents. Floods consume towns, bridges collapse, landslides bury families. 10 homes gone in minutes, dozens displaced, while Beijing remains silent. In tandem with nature's fury comes the slow magmission implosion of the real estate sector. 20 million pre-sold homes remain unfinished. Buyers who once staked their savings now face the prospect of never receiving keys. Developers are bankrupt, banks refuse to lend, the CCP injected billions, yet it wasn't enough. Now policy banks are being armed with controversial tools like PSL, pledged supplementary lending loans, to prop up a crumbling sector. But even that might not stave off the inevitable. What once was a policy engine of growth has become a social time bomb. Home buyers boycott mortgage payments, empty towers haunt city skylines, local officials whisper of unrest. A Nomura's securities report from November 15, 2024, exposed a staggering 20 million unsold pre-sale homes. 20 times the scale of Country Garden. Completing these projects demands 3.2 trillion CNY, $443 billion, 0 cents, an impossible sum in this economic wasteland. Even a 20% increase in completions would leave 52% of homes sold between 2015 and 2020 undelivered. Buyers' patience is fraying, and analysts warn of social unrest by 2026 if delays persist. This could endanger social stability. The global and domestic economic landscape is shrouded in a bleak gray haze, as if the entire world is engulfed in an unrelenting storm. Millions of workers, from urban centers to rural villages, are being thrust into destitution with no way out. Businesses, from small startups to large corporations, are grappling with the pressure to cut costs to survive. Countless companies are forced to scale back recruitment or lay off employees at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, the labor market has become fiercely competitive. 12.22 million college and university graduates nationwide enter this job market, where opportunities are a rare luxury, nearly impossible to grasp. In this harsh environment, millions of workers, from young, ambitious individuals to seasoned, middle-aged laborers, are plunged into despair, struggling to find any semblance of hope. Day after day, hour after hour, workers scour major cities, submitting resumes and attending interviews, only to be met with a deafening silence. Job applications vanish like stones dropped into the sea with no response in sight. Some travel tirelessly from one province to another, from city to city, hoping to secure any job, even a temporary one. But the cruel reality is that the doors of opportunity seem firmly shut. Many find themselves unemployed, without money to cover basic expenses, and ultimately face the most terrifying prospect: becoming homeless, wandering the streets, surviving on meager earnings from odd jobs. Honestly, finding even a side gig is tough these days, one worker shared, their voice laced with bitterness. Many are dipping into their life savings, and truth be told, some don't even have savings to fall back on. Finding a job now is incredibly hard. You search, but nothing turns up. Really, some people are just scraping by, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. Such heart-wrenching stories are far from rare. At construction sites, once bustling hubs for thousands of manual laborers, the scene is now desolate. A worker at a site in Wuhan shared, "After the Lunar New Year, I came here and worked for half a month, picking up 3 odd jobs. Now the site is shutting down and there's nothing left to do. I can't keep working. Honestly, those who haven't come out here should stay put. Construction this year is brutal. Earning money feels harder than eating dirt." This worker, over 50 years old, has been running from one industrial park to another, only to find that companies only hire those under 50. No job, no way to go back home. It's truly unbearable suffering. He confided, eyes filled with sorrow. At 5 a.m., when the streets are still cloaked in morning mist, they become temporary shelters for workers who can't afford lodging, some to save a few hundred yuan under eaves or in hidden corners of bus stations. "I just got off the bus and saw this scene. It broke my heart," one person recounted. "Some sleep outside to save 100 yuan on lodging. It's truly heartbreaking to witness." These images are not just symbols of poverty, but stark evidence of an economically devastating year. Unemployment and debt are spreading like a pandemic. Statistics reveal that over 800 million people are burdened with massive debts, with the 1980s and 1990s generations facing average debts 18.5 times their monthly income, roughly 130,000 yuan per person. Meanwhile, 23 million people are unemployed, and even jobs like ride-hailing or delivery are oversaturated, no longer a lifeline. Jobs are harder to find and savings are dwindling, one worker lamented. Now, many have to cut expenses, downgrade their lifestyle just to survive. Survival is the most important thing now. The construction industry, once a pillar of the economy, is now in crisis. Projects are stalled. Cash flow has dried up, leaving many construction bosses in financial ruin. Doing construction with no money coming in, sometimes you can't even afford to treat clients to a meal, one contractor shared. There are supportive policies, but payments for projects never come through. How can we keep going? Workers in the construction sector, from laborers to engineers, are left working for nothing. Many, after years of dedication, are left with nothing but debts for building homes, for materials, for workers' wages. "I worked my whole life and in the end I have nothing," a construction worker said bitterly. "All my earnings went to debts. My son grew up unable to marry and the house is drowning in loans." It's the perfect definition of poverty haunting 3 generations. In major cities like Hoat, Shanghai, and Wuhan, the saturation of the job market is glaring. Factories and industrial zones, once magnets for workers, are now closing or downsizing. One worker shared, "I thought factory work would be stable, but now I see it's worse than prison. In prison, at least you get breaks and free health care. In factories, you stand for 12 hours a day, can't even go to the bathroom, get scolded by supervisors, and earn wages too low to live on." Someone who served time said they'd rather go back to prison than work in a factory. These stories don't stop at the cities. In rural areas, the situation is no better. Farmers accustomed to toiling under the sun now face the reality that farming no longer sustains a family. Crop prices are low, while the cost of fertilizers and seeds skyrocket. Many young people leave for the cities, but unable to find work, return to villages with no prospects. "The city has no place for me, and my hometown offers no way to live," a man nearing 50 shared. "I want to go back, but what would I do, build a house and sink into debt? Without a house, my kids can't even start a family." Amid this, manual laborers, from farmers to factory workers, face an uncertain future. They're not just battling poverty, but also loneliness and despair. Men over 60, never married, wandering with a backpack, a water bottle, and a few sacks are common at bridges and bus stations. They survive on odd jobs, earning a few tens of thousands of yuan daily, barely enough for a meal, let alone rent. "This life is too cruel," one worker shared. "I tried my whole life, and in the end I have nothing." The current economic situation is not just a crisis. It's a storm sweeping away all hope. Small businesses are shuttering en masse. The real estate market is collapsing, dragging down related industries like construction, furniture, and logistics. Millions of workers face the risk of losing their jobs, homes, and futures. Meanwhile, mounting debts and financial pressures make the prospect of a stable life increasingly distant. Save money, pay off debts, try to survive is the strategy many are forced to adopt. But will it be enough to weather this storm? Beijing is dying, not with a bang, but with a slow, unrelenting suffocation. The same applies to Shanghai, Shenzhen, and hundreds of cities across the country. The silence in malls, the dust on empty shelves, the faded neon of ghost streets, these are not symbols of temporary downturn, they are tombstones of a dream. As the economy collapses, the pandemic returns, the climate rebels, and the public loses faith, the real crisis begins, not just of policy, but of belief. Because what happens when even hope begins to die? Cities across China reflect the same desolation. Nanjing saw property listings surge 332.5% in a single day after restrictions were lifted. Wuhan saw 7,000 homes flood the market in just 3 days, with sellers slashing prices by 10–15% to attract buyers who remained paralyzed by fear of further collapse. In Guangzhou, once vibrant neighborhoods have reverted to 2017 price levels, with a 4.5 million yuan unit selling for just over 3 million yuan after relentless cuts. Homeowners, many burdened by crushing loans, face the nightmare of negative equity, losing their homes while drowning in debt. Transaction volumes have cratered. Shanghai's deals dropped from 29,000 to 22,000 in a month. Professor Hang Zhong warns of millions of unfinished housing units, a burden that will haunt China for years. Political commentator Chen Peng ties the crisis to factory closures, vanishing exports, and soaring unemployment, declaring the real estate sector a dead weight dragging the nation into the abyss. The CCP's data blackout is a desperate act of self-preservation, but it cannot hide the truth forever. From land sales to unemployment rates, the regime has scrubbed vital statistics, forcing scholars to rely on unconventional metrics, satellite nightlight maps, cement sales, even gym closures to gauge the economy's pulse. One economist tracks business owners fleeing with prepaid gym memberships, claiming it reveals more than the CCP's fabricated GDP. The 2021 Data Outbound Control Law has buried even basic company records. Meanwhile, the halt of youth unemployment data after a 46.5% estimate in 2023 underscores the regime's fear. Sun Yuyang, a professor at Taiwan's National Chengchi University, delivers a chilling prognosis. The disappearance of data is the CCP's admission of failure. It hides the truth because the truth would shatter its legitimacy. As Chinese economy slides into a long-term black box, the regime's opacity only accelerates its downfall. The world watches as China hurtles toward a reckoning, one that will expose the full horror of its economic collapse. China's descent into chaos is not merely economic, but reaches into every facet of society. In the heart of Wuhan, a city scarred by history, gunfire shatter the night, a chilling anthem of defiance against the CCP. CCP, CCP, CCP. The cry with guns in hand, "Follow me," reverberates not as a mere slogan but as a primal scream of a society on the brink of implosion. China, once a beacon of ambition, now suffers as a dystopian prison under the CCP's iron grip. 3 years of suffocating lockdowns have morphed into sealed borders and a digital cage, trapping a nation in fear and despair. The regime's lies can no longer mask the truth. China is unraveling, and the sparks of rebellion are igniting. On the night of May 18, 2025, Wuhan's bustling night market became a battlefield. Hong Kong's Tsingtao Daily reported a horrifying scene at a barbecue stall in the Aola community. At 10 p.m., a gunman unleashed a hail of bullets on unsuspecting diners. The crack of at least 4 shots echoed through the chaos. 2 lay dead, blood pooling beneath a lifeless body slumped in a chair. Another sprawled on the ground. Witnesses fled in terror, their screams captured in videos that briefly flooded Chinese social media before the CCP's censorship machine erased them. A chilling chat record surfaced. "I was eating barbecue when a gunman at a Xinjiang stall shot 2 people dead. We ran for our lives." Overseas platforms preserved the footage, images of a man possibly shot in the head, another covered by a blanket as bystanders wept. Xi'an District Police brazenly lied, labeling it an intentional injury sparked by a restaurant dispute, claiming 1 death and 2 stable victims. But netizens, fueled by rage, pointed to evidence of 2 fatalities, both shot execution style, exposing the regime's desperate cover-up. Commentator Su Jiawen on his explosive program revealed a rifle phone. The shooters were military personnel armed with a rifle and handgun, firing with precision before vanishing. In a nation where gun ownership is a privilege reserved for the state, this was no random act. Su argues it was a deliberate echo of the 1911 Wuchang uprising, a symbolic middle finger to Xi Jinping's regime. The CCP, born from the barrel of a gun, lives in terror of armed civilians. The regime dreads a real-life let the bullets fly. With the economy in tatters, unemployment soaring, and public fury boiling, Every gunshot is a dagger to the CCP's heart. Su's warning is apocalyptic. If one dares shout, "Overthrow the Communist Party," 1,000,000 will follow. And overseas netizens' words haunt. Is this the new Wuchang uprising? In chaos, heroes rise. Whoever holds a gun becomes king. The carnage didn't end there. On May 16, 2025, at 3 a.m., a steel-laden truck roared through a police checkpoint on China's G205 national highway, leaving a trail of devastation. 18 officers were killed or maimed, 3 dead instantly, 6 clinging to life. This was the deadliest attack on police in 5 years. Videos shared by ex-user DongSmile reveal an apocalyptic scene: mangled police cars, officers hurled meters away, blood-soaked gears scattered among reflective cones, flung 20M rescuers battled to free trapped officers with hydraulic cutters. The youngest victim, a 24-year-old rookie, and the oldest, a 52-year-old veteran, paid the ultimate price. Whispers of motive swirl. Was it driver fatigue or a vengeful act after a fine? Ex-user Louis Xin alleged the driver, enraged by police extortion, deliberately plowed into the checkpoint, with additional deaths hushed up. The CCP buried the story, scrubbing posts and banning accounts. Yet netizens defied the blackout, their fury uncontainable. They silenced the news, but not their rage. In Beijing, a different rebellion brews. Public buses, once a symbol of community, are now battlegrounds of resentment. Security guards dubbed onboard administrators have replaced beloved ticket sellers, sparking a firestorm of outrage. A viral video, "Beijing Bus Security Sparks Public Outrage," exposes guards in filthy uniforms reeking of neglect, dozing on duty. Passengers choke on their stench, their presence a blight on Beijing's civilized image. Netizens demand the return of ticket sellers, lamenting the loss of local jobs to these useless guards. Guards in turn expose their hellish reality. 16-hour shifts, one tattered uniform, and wages as low as $2 a yuan a day. Lao Ma, a veteran guard, told the Epoch Times, "I quit after 10 days. Up before dawn, asleep past midnight, eating scraps in a 12M2 room with 8 others. Worse than prison. The route is corrupt." Beijing's state-owned bus companies funnel money to third-party contractors, leaving guards exploited and passengers enraged. Observer Li Cheng called it total rot. Guards, clueless about routes, mocked as useless and idle, deepen the social chasm. The CCP's obsession with control is tearing society apart. China itself is a prison. 3 years of COVID lockdowns concealed the cities, sealed doors welded shut. People starving were just the beginning. Now borders are closing, and a high-tech exit control system traps citizens. Author Chun Jing, writing for Vision Times, recounts a prophetic dream from 2019. Pummel Day, everyone will be imprisoned. That nightmare is reality. Shanghai, once a global hub, is now a testing ground for a dystopian risk-scoring system. Big data, facial recognition, and social media scrutiny flag anyone seeking to leave. A single critical post, a foreign contact, or an NGO link can brand you high risk. Miss Lin, a Shanghai professional, was denied a passport renewal for translating an environmental report a decade ago. Her voice broke. "We just want our son to study. Is that a crime?" a professor lamented. Academic freedom is dead. This isn't protection, it's paranoia. Lawyer Zhang Wei called the national security law pure power, targeting thinkers, artists, and builders, the very soul of China. The regime's fear is palpable. Isolated abroad and crumbling at home, the CCP builds a digital Berlin Wall, severing connections, silencing voices. Neighbors distrust neighbors, friends self-censor, families whisper warnings. One wrong word can unravel a life. History screams, regimes ruled by fear collapse, not by force but by their people's awakening. The human spirit cannot be caged. "You can seize my passport," a young programmer whispered, "but not my desire to be free." The light of rebellion shines through the cracks, and China's reckoning is coming. China's once bustling international airports now stand as desolate mausoleums, their empty halls echoing with the death knell of a collapsing economy. Ghostly terminals devoid of life bear witness to a nation forsaken by the world. Pilots and flight attendants unpaid for months scavenge for survival, while major airlines crumble into bankruptcy. Foreigners have vanished. Tourist hotspots are shrouded in eerie silence. The CCP's belligerent wolf warrior diplomacy and suffocating security measures have walled China off from humanity.
Cataclysm looms, dwarfing the U.S.-China tariff war, a ticking bomb poised to obliterate what remains of the nation's economy. With 80% of export orders halted and domestic demand too frail to fill the void, giants like Apple are fleeing, threatening 3 million jobs. As the CCP plans mass asset seizures to fund its desperate economic war, President Trump declares China's economy is crashing spectacular. Yet in the shadows, the CCP kneels quietly, exempting tariffs on 130 U.S. products. Welcome to China Undercover, where we expose the raw, unfiltered truth of a nation betrayed.
The haunting emptiness of China's airports tells a story of collapse. Shanghai Pudong, once a throbbing hub, now languishes in silence. Its duty-free shops are shuttered, staff standing idle like specters. Beijing Capital Airport, a former beacon of vitality, is a wasteland of vacant seats and closed counters. Even Dalianzhou Shuzhe International Airport at 11:20 p.m. on a weekend sees a mere trickle of passengers. Its throughput a pitiful shadow of its past. Netizens lament the desolation. Kuala Lumpur's airport buzzes with life, but Kunming is a cold, empty shell. Beijing's Terminal 3 feels like a crypt. Just 5 years ago, holiday crowds overflowed, travelers spilling onto floors for lack of seats. Now, the May Day holiday rush is a cruel mirage, with airports across China resembling abandoned relics. The CCP's visa-free policy meant to lure Western tourists has failed miserably, as foreigners recoil from a deteriorating business climate and a nation that feels like a prison. The aviation industry is bleeding out. Joy Air, a major operator, abruptly canceled all flights, pilots delivering food and flight attendants peddling wares at street stalls to survive. Pilot's voice cracks with anguish. 3 years without pay, no social security. I can't afford my children's school fees or my parents' medicine. How many families like mine have shattered? Xiao Chen, a former flight attendant, now lives off dwindling savings. One of tens of thousands who fled the industry, promised recovery post-pandemic, but it's a lie. Flights are grounded, losses mount, and every industry, clothing, construction, even fruit stalls, is dying.
China's state-owned airlines, Air China, China Southern, and China Eastern, reported staggering losses in 2024, $4,900,000,000, 0 cents, $3,300,000,000, 0 cents, and $5,700,000,000, 0 cents, respectively, marking 5 years of financial hemorrhage. International capacity lags 20% below 2019 levels. Airfares plummet with 80% discounts, and high-speed rail undercuts what remains of the industry. The global aviation sector recovered in 2023, but China's carriers are drowning. Foreigners have abandoned China, detoured by an internet firewall blocking apps, the absence of Airbnb, and draconian rules requiring police registration within 24 hours of arrival. Beijing streets bristle with ID checks, hotels segregate foreigners, and violent attacks on visitors last year have fueled fear. U.S. economist David Hutt told the Epoch Times,
Travelers from the U.S., Europe, Japan, and South Korea dread Chinese censorship, opaque laws, and safety risks. International airlines, Emirates, Qantas, Lufthansa, Polis, and others have axed U.S.-China flights to just 30% of 2019 levels. Netizens cry out, the CCP rejects the world, and the world rejects us. No English signs, no internet, no tourists. Shanghai's streets, once alive with foreigners, are now a graveyard. The tariff war is a death blow. With 145% U.S. tariffs and elimination of the $800 0 cents de minimis exemption, 80% of export orders have evaporated. A cardboard box manufacturer weeps. Clients canceled everything. Goods sit undelivered. Profits gone. The world's factory is a ghost town. Its 14,000 export-reliant firms crippled. Factories hoard unsold inventory, unable to pay suppliers, teetering on bankruptcy. A Guangzhou survey reveals despair. 20% of exporters expect sales to drop by over 30%. 9.4% predict total collapse. Domestic demand, gutted by economic decline, cannot save them. Chongqiang, a garment factory owner, told Reuters, exports earn 20 yuan per item, domestic sales barely 2 yuan, as Southeast Asia tightens rules to block transshipment. Vietnam's exports to the U.S. soared from $49 billion, 0 cents in 2018, to $116 billion, 0 cents in 2024, siphoning China's market. The loss is permanent. Apple's shift to India, producing 50 million iPhones annually, threatens 3 million Chinese jobs. Professor Sun warns this exodus will crush local finances and spark social unrest. With unemployment potentially hitting 60 million and 12 million graduates facing a barren job market, China teeters on the edge of chaos. The CCP's response has been a predatory purge masked as anti-corruption. The Central Commission for Discipline Inspection disciplined 185,000 officials in Q1 2025, a 50% surge, seizing assets to fund the tariff war. Wen Honping, an Australia-based scholar, told the Epoch Times, "This isn't about justice. It's a desperate grab for cash to prop up a failing regime." Former Deputy Governor Fay's $55 million, 0 cents in bribes, led to a death sentence and total asset confiscation. Retired officials, once untouchable, now face probes with no time limits. Seized funds are funneled to military and police budgets, a poisoned chalice that fuels panic among Beijing's elite. It's drinking poison to quench thirst, Gwen says, eroding the regime from within. On April 30, 2025, President Trump declared China's economy is crashing spectacularly, citing factory decline. The CCP's propaganda video, "China Won't Kneel," a 2-minute rant against U.S. tariffs, was mocked globally. Netizens on X sneered they'd rather let us eat grass than admit defeat. Yet Beijing quietly capitulated, slashing tariffs on 130 U.S. products, vaccines, chemicals, jet engines, from 125% to 0. A secret visit by Finance Minister Lan Feng to the U.S. Treasury on April 24 suggests negotiations despite denials. The CCP's bravado is a facade. Its economy is on its knees. As China isolates itself, the world moves on, leaving a nation trapped in its own lies. Share your thoughts below and join China Undercover for more raw truths. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned.